The past decade has seen some of the most ambitious and technically impressive video games ever created, with AAA studios pushing the boundaries of what's possible in gaming. However, not all of these high-budget titles lived up to their lofty promises. Whether due to misguided design choices, technical failures, or a lack of innovation, several AAA games have landed with a thud, leaving fans disappointed and critics unimpressed. From hollow, uninspired experiences to outright disasters, these titles have become cautionary tales of how even the biggest budgets and most famous franchises can falter. Here are the 10 worst AAA games of the decade so far, each of them marking a low point in gaming's modern era. So, the 10th worst AAA game of the decade on our list is Skull and Bones. Skull and Bones was doomed long before its release. Plagued by weak marketing, endless delays, and reports of troubled development, Ubisoft's so-called quadruple A pirate game landed with a whimper. Despite promising high seas adventure, it couldn't match the thrill of Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag, the game that inspired it. The naval combat felt stale, the open world was dull, and the lifeless story and characters failed to captivate. Ultimately, Skull and Bones became a prime example of a bloated, overhyped AAA title, more focused on chasing live service trends than being genuinely fun. And on number 9, we have Saints Row. The 2022 Saints Row reboot tried to ditch the series' wacky tone in favor of broader appeal, a move that backfired badly. Stripping away the franchise's crude charm, it instead offered cringe-worthy attempts to pander to Gen Z. The result pleased no one. Longtime fans missed the signature craziness, while newcomers felt patronized. Combined with bland gameplay, repetitive missions, and forgettable characters, it became one of the most lifeless AAA releases in recent years. After its commercial failure, developer Volition was shut down, leaving the series' future in limbo. And on number 8, we have Babylon's Fall. Babylon's Fall, Platinum Games' first attempt at a live service title, was a disastrous step down from their acclaimed work on Bayonetta and Nier Automata. The action RPG was slammed for its dated visuals, dull gameplay loop, and aggressive microtransactions. Even with friends, the experience was painfully boring and shockingly low quality for such a respected developer. Player numbers plummeted quickly, even hitting 0 concurrent players just months after launch. Square Enix pulled the plug less than a year later, making Babylon's Fall one of gaming's most spectacular flops. And the 7th worst AAA game of the decade is Call of Duty: Modern Warfare 3. The Call of Duty series is often criticized for its formulaic approach, but it typically delivers a polished experience. Until Modern Warfare 3, 2023, broke the streak. Widely seen as a repurposed Modern Warfare 2 DLC disguised as a mainline entry, it was slammed for its bland campaign, which lazily recycled Warzone elements. The multiplayer offered no original 6 versus 6 maps, instead rehashing ones from 2009's Modern Warfare 2. Even Zombies mode felt uninspired. The game came across as a shameless test of how little effort Activision could get away with. Thankfully, Black Ops 6 recently redeemed the series, though Modern Warfare 3 remains a glaring example of AAA complacency. And on number 6, we have Godfall. Despite launching alongside the PS5, Godfall quickly faded into obscurity, and for good reason. This always online action RPG felt like a generic, paint-by-numbers AAA effort, offering nothing fresh in its visuals, gameplay, or story. Its grind-heavy mechanics lacked meaningful rewards, making it easy for most players to abandon after a weekend or two. Essentially, a glorified tech demo, riddled with bugs no less, Godfall somehow justified a £70 price tag at launch. Yet its greatest flaw is its forgettability. So devoid of personality, it barely lingers in memory, serving as a prime example of style over substance. And the 5th worst AAA game of the decade is Forspoken. Square Enix's action RPG Forspoken stumbled out of the gate, mocked pre-release for its cringeworthy dialogue, and things didn't improve at launch. Despite the impressive luminous engine, its world, Aether, was lifeless and dull, made worse by a sluggish, overlong prologue. Protagonist Frey was forgettable, the dialogue grating, and the combat grew stale fast. Even the decent traversal lost its charm over time. Ultimately, Forspoken was a generic fantasy action game, relying on flashy visuals to mask its lack of personality and uninspired gameplay, a disappointingly competent low point. And the fourth worst AAA game of the decade on our list is Battlefield 2042. Battlefield 2042 marked a major stumble for the once reliable franchise. Fans were frustrated by the lack of a single-player campaign, the removal of the beloved class system, and the swarm of bugs plaguing the launch. The game quickly became one of Steam's worst-reviewed titles, with its player count nosediving within weeks. Although EA and DICE rolled out post-launch fixes, the damage was done. Many players abandoned it in favour of older entries like Battlefield 1 and Battlefield 5, which still boast higher concurrent Steam player counts even in 2025, a clear sign of the community's rejection. And the third worst AAA game of the decade is Redfall. Redfall, an open-world FPS from Arcane, the studio behind Dishonored and Prey, was a crushing disappointment. Despite the team's strong reputation, the game turned out to be a bland, squad-based shooter with forgettable characters, clunky gunplay, weak AI, and a dull open world riddled with performance issues. Even with friends, the real fun came from mocking the game's flaws rather than enjoying its intended looter-shooter thrills. Post-launch reports revealed that many Arcane devs were unwilling to make the game, and it showed. The backlash was so severe that Microsoft apologized just 2 days after release. Yet, Redfall limped on for a year before Microsoft pulled the plug, shutting down Arcane Austin. And on number 2, we have Suicide Squad: Kill the Justice League. No one was surprised by the failure of Suicide Squad: Kill the Justice League. It was clear even before launch that Rocksteady, known for the Batman Arkham games, had been pushed into making this shallow live service cash grab. Beyond its slick cutscenes, the game was a hollow shell of a AAA blockbuster, lacking any real soul. Even if the looter-shooter gameplay had been enjoyable, it wasn't. The meager launch content left most players with nothing worthwhile to do after a weekend or two. Despite its flashy production, it's baffling how such a repetitive, content-starved game could cost $200 million. The result? One of the most spectacular AAA disasters in gaming history. And the last worst AAA game of the decade on our list is The Lord of the Rings: Gollum. Few were clamouring for a AAA stealth game starring Gollum, but even so, The Lord of the Rings Gollum was an unmitigated disaster. Its dated graphics made a poor first impression, and the dull, repetitive stealth gameplay did little to improve things. Clocking in at a frustrating 15 hours, assuming you don't rage quit from the constant bugs, clunky controls, and maddening fail states, it felt like a test of patience. The game's dismal quality ultimately drove developer Daedalic Entertainment to abandon game development altogether, amid reports of a toxic workplace. A truly forgettable low point for AAA gaming. Which AAA game of the last decade do you consider the worst? Let us know in the comments section, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more videos like this.